me.
You sound great there, Mahir.
Yeah. Okay, great. That's that Rick. Sounds like it.
Yes, hey there.
All right. So there we go. So welcome. We're going to go back and forth a little bit, and then maybe is there some way on the side I can see what else, everybody else, it all disappeared. Okay, I have just my screen. I'll assume human beings are still there.
Mahir, one
So
little thing, this happens to me too. If you move your little bar at the top, we see a long gray bar right above engaging. So if you just click your little bar and move it up a bit, it'll
okay.
just move it out of the way. You can click the little green part down at the bottom of that little bar, and that'll give you control to move it.
Is it still out of the way? Is it still in the way, or is it
Yes, it's moving.
okay? Can you still see most of it?
A little. Don't worry. You can keep going.
Yeah, I'm trying to see if there's a way to minimize that uh, bar. I wonder if on the bottom it might be better. Let's see. Now, is that any better there?
Sure.
Well, now
It's
it's at the
fine.
bottom, so I think it's still not a good
Yeah,
placement here.
I'd put it up as close as you can to the top.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think that might be the
All
best too.
right, we'll give it a go. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're gonna ping pong back and forth a little bit, and then there's a video in there, which is a even better place to sleep if we haven't gotten to it by then. And we want to, it's hard with these webinars to sort of be very interactive, but we're going to take you through some examples and then show you one that is kind of a nice one to talk about improvements. So let us see. Why, there it goes. So I'm going to turn it over to Carrie and give us a little context of where some of this work on this EASEL learning model came from.
So I've been working at trying to get engineers integrated as a part of science for about 30 years. And finally, with the framework and then the next generation science standards, we have a lot of support for doing that. So, but at that point, I thought, what do we really know about what works best, and what are the advantages of having engineering as a part of science? So, starting about 5 years ago, maybe six now, Mahir and I started going through the literature, and we reviewed about 500 research papers involving engineering education. We narrowed it down to 263 that actually had data on what kids think or know about engineering before they start learning about it. What are the effective methods for teaching it at the K-12 levels? And what are the benefits of engineering as a part of science? So let's go to the next slide, Mahir.
Okay. By the way, folks, if anybody tries to send me an email there, it won't work. It's spelled incorrectly. I don't know why, but we have a contact thing at the end of the talk.
Yeah.
Right, Carrie.
So these are just a few of the key points. I mean, it's a rather long paper. And also what we have at the end of this slide deck is some resources, including a link to this paper and a link to a short paper in Science Scope that summarizes the key ideas. But here are just four main points. First of all, engineering engages youth interest because it's team-oriented, it's project-based, and it addresses real-world problems. There's never a question about why are we doing this. Secondly, students develop 21st century skills, including creativity, teamwork, communication skills, persistence, and resilience, in addition to what they're learning about science. So these are really important skills that everybody needs for life. The third point is that engineering integrated with science can help students develop the science concepts better and skills in science and math, as well as new skills in engineering, because as they're putting the science and math to work, they're really learning to use it. So they're applying it. And then fourth, students develop increased motivation and identity as a STEM learner. So as an example, we just pulled out one of the 365 studies, 263 studies. This particular one is a teacher who was teaching physics and he introduced the use of this submergible robot as part of the remotely operated vehicle as part of the science class. So it was an inner city school where daily attendance varied between 50 and 60%. And when he introduced this approach, the integrating engineering into science, in one class, he compared how things went in the other comparable class. And I think you can see after about 10 weeks, he introduced the new approach. And all of a sudden, attendance started going up to the 80 and 90% level in the class where he was doing remotely operated vehicles. And attendance stayed about the 50% level in the other class. So that's just one of many, many examples, because not only is it fun and engaging, but kids can really see why it's important. So
There's one point that's worth noting about this particular paper.
Mhm.
It's hard to find A/B comparisons in education research, which what makes this very nice. Same school, same
Yeah.
teacher, same class, same outcomes, learning goals, two different methods. But what was really fun is, as you see around mid-week 8, 9, 10, it starts separating. The kids in the class with the remotely operated vehicle were actually going out and finding their buddies who were skipping class and dragging them in because they wanted to keep working on the project and they needed the teammates. So it's an interesting indicator. Go ahead. Next slide.
We need the next slide.
Yeah, if it'll cooperate on me. Okay.
There we go.
There we go.
So Mahir, I think here's where you would take it over.
Yeah, and I'm going to vary my speed a little bit. You guys will have a copy of the presentations, and there's some things with sort of more examples and working, and maybe I'll talk a little bit more about the bigger picture things. But I want to try to talk about, what we really have been seeing this last few years is it's actually very straightforward to engage students. I don't think it's the hardest part. The biggest thing is how to help teachers amongst very, very busy schedules. And so I want to talk about what are some insights from a teaching point of view that might help you. And if I assume most folks are science teachers and now maybe they're adding some engineering or not, you have to make time. So one of the things that's not so obvious is that the processes are very similar. I was a practicing applied physicist for a decade before then getting into my technology career. And, this surprised me that many people, certainly not just the lay public, but science teachers, don't know how similar the processes are. We make a mathematical theory, we do an experiment, we get results and analyze it, we improve the theory. In engineering, we make a model, and it's always a mathematical model, actually, these days in real life. And it doesn't mean you have to do that for a class. Paper and cardboard are great, but in reality, there's no car, Tesla vehicle, SpaceX rocket, new Samsung mobile phone, Apple Watch. That doesn't start with a mathematical model. We build a prototype, we measure it, we get data, we analyze it, and we improve the model. So it's a very similar process, which is cool. You don't really need to change that part of your skill set. If we've been teaching science as this sort of iterative process, engineering is the same way. But even better, this is sort of secret number 2. Inside of science, if you go talk to any practicing experimental scientists, and that's about 90% of them, there's not that many theorists. When we do science and we build that experiment, it's mostly an engineering process where we build a model of the apparatus, we build a prototype of the apparatus, we get some data. It's not good enough to publish or understand. You go and improve your apparatus until you've got some data, and then you go back into that bigger cycle above, which is the science cycle. So hidden, it's a pretty interesting, happy secret that hidden inside the process of science is a whole engineering process. So this is another tool I wanted to offer you as a technique. You don't have to fit in an engineering activity after a science. You can also integrate it into the science by actually having kids design and build their own apparatus. And I've had great success doing this. We've done projects where kids have built, a lot of their own gadgets, microscopes, telescopes, turbidity meters, and things. So it's one method, but keep in mind this parallelism, and keep in mind when you open up the science. Presuming you're mostly science teachers and you're trying to find time, here's a way that you can just sort of not have to make pre or post time. And in our review paper, we sort of talk about, we do have evidence of what's the best way now to integrate engineering and science. It's to put them together, not one first and then the second, or in the other order. So the EASEL learning model is pretty simple, and it draws on things that are already known out there, but it really builds on what we've seen working with a lot of students across a lot of economic and sort of ethnic range. And really, it started from this work on integrating the science and engineering, because they're not really separate. Scientists, engineers, part of their work, and good engineers are scientific about their work. So as I said, the processes are not only similar, but the two activities go together. My joke is NASA doesn't take 10 teams, give them $1 billion each, say, build 10 models of your rockets, we launch them, and the one or two that don't blow up, we're going to go with that design. No, they do a lot of scientific modeling, testing, materials, propulsion, vibration, and then after all of that, science, around the performance, around materials. Then it goes down to actually engineering, and you build the prototype of that first rocket on there. So there's three areas that the EASEL model draws from. And the reason for the authentic is that it's sort of lost on the engineering side that there's a science step in there. You don't just hack and build a bunch of stuff and see what works, which is what most engineering activities that we've seen in K-12 are of that flavor. There's a step to actually get data, explore the materials, whatever it may be in there, and then go to the engineering. Same thing in the science. There's actually engineering in there, and practicing scientists are often spending a good chunk of time engineering their apparatus. Okay, so teaching it this way is actually more authentic than it may seem at first. PBL, most folks are probably familiar with. I think the 5 E's are pretty popular, and so we'll give you some examples as we go. Carrie, you want to just talk about these next couple, about PBL and 5 E's? Carrie, are you there?
There we go. I was unmuting. Okay. So project-based learning has three essential characteristics. First of all, real-world context. That's the project. Secondly, student voice and choice. So it's important that the kids be really engaged in understanding and often defining the problem and coming up with solutions and making choices about what solution would be best. And then third, collaboration and teamwork is absolutely essential. So kids are always working in teams. So that corresponds to the three key aspects of EASEL. So real-world context, both are real-world contexts. In EASEL, we emphasize the idea that it's authentic science and engineering challenges. Secondly, purposeful themes. So students are engaged in understanding the purpose of what they're doing, not just what to do and how to do it, but why they're doing it. And then third, teamwork. So EASEL really reflects the three key characteristics of project-based learning. Let's go on to the next slide and describe the relationship between the 5E model. So EASEL really integrates PBL with 5Es. So engagement is similar to play and make. Sometimes kids are involved in a make activity. That's fun, but they always have to start with something fun and engaging. Purposeful play is the term that EASEL uses. Exploration is that what they begin with, often it's a make activity, is improvable. So this is where the engineering design enters. Students explore the materials, they explore the ideas, but then they figure out how to maximize or make it better or help it to really solve the problem that they're now engaged with. Explanation. It's important for kids in the 5E model to explain the science, what they've learned at that point. And in the EASEL, there's a similar step, which is a reset where kids all of a sudden stop and they share what they've learned so far. That often involves both explaining the science, but also explaining the solution that they're working on and how they're thinking about the problem. And then elaboration in the 5E model corresponds to the idea of rapid iteration. In engineering, it's not a one-off. Kids need to test their prototype and then use that test to iterate and improve the solution they're working on. And finally, evaluation is an important part of the 5E model. And in engineering, you always evaluate and you have a clear test to determine, did we solve the problem? And if so, if we did solve the problem, how can we optimize it and do a better job of it? So evaluation always has a step in the EASEL model that is similar to the 5E. So I think you can see, looking at these, really how EASEL integrates both approaches, PBL and 5Es. So Mihiri, I think we're going to toss this back to you.
One of the things I've heard from folks about learning models, and I think 5Es is the one that across the nation I wind up hearing the most. And Roger Bybee is a colleague and good friend of Carrie and mine more recently. He's a terrific guy, and I think it's really remarkable the impact that 5Es have had. But sometimes teachers have said there was just a little bit too much work to map my activity into all 5 strictly and things. So we kind of said, well, we should think about a model with a little simpler. So 3. So there's really 2 parts to EASEL. One is a sequence that we found it maps onto sort of what's known about learning and sort of learning theory, but also empirically. And this sequence works better this way. Starting with purpose, and kids do know something that's purposeful versus useless. In play, it's just all human beings. You start on that positive note. That motivates learning about what that first thing you played with, how does it work? And you have a goal, you want to make something and you want to make it better. So it leads to this explore, and that's the code word for science. But that's what science essentially is. If you think about science as a noun, well, the verb is explore. So in one sense, using the word explore is something I think is more natural to people, and it goes obviously well beyond science. So it says, let's explore whatever it is that we decided to work on. And purposeful play always starts with sort of an improvable model of a first activity, not a lot of any theory or framework, just, hey, let's go make a quick and dirty water filter or an air rocket or a little rubber band car, or whatever it may be. Just let them do it. And I'll show you a couple of examples. Oh, we went backwards here. That motivates explore, which is actually, what might have been a traditional science exploration. And then that experience where they share their data and their learnings and experiences informs moving into a design step. And I like to talk about design with kids more than actually engineering, because design, again, goes across many, many domains. And the heart of engineering is that design process. So now they're designing with data and information and learnings they've collected. They've made it part of their own. And that's actually the way the real world works, as it else, right? We explore a new area, we get new data, we develop theories, we're building frameworks. Nobody has given us the framework on there. And so that process should map sort of the notion of open inquiry. We're not giving a fixed experiment, they're designing an experiment. This takes it up a little bit, looking at that whole integrated activity, which has got both science and engineering in it. So 2 parts. There's a strategy. Start with purposeful play, and both are important. That motivates moving to an explore step, and that gives you information and authentic data and real information to move to a design step. It's not hacking. The second part of these are a set of tactics we found that help, and they can be used all or some and in each of these steps. And I'm not going to go into all of them, but I'll share a few words and then a few slides on a few of these. You guys will have handouts. There's more information in there. Number 1, and more than anything, if there's one thing you take away, is start from where they are. we have standards, we have outcomes, we have things in districts. I think one of the reasons teachers wind up feeling a loss of agency is this feeling of restriction and constriction, and I've got to fit into this and this curriculum and this lesson plan. And I have tremendous sympathy for this. And on top of that, just the amount of load. But I had a teacher we did an activity with who, after 2 weeks of a crazy frenetic design studio thing, said, wow, this was like a vacation. I said, Julie, how can that be? I mean, you've been right. I said, well, I was just running around helping the teams when they had questions. They were all engaged. So if we can get engagement, a lot of other things happen. Of course, better learning, but actually a little bit of a pause and a mental ease on yourself as a teacher, that your energy is going to helping them learn, not keeping them on track or pulling them back in. That underwater remotely operated vehicle paper was that example where kids actually started pulling their friends back in. I have a few slides and start from where they are. Easy on-ramps. There's a phrase, a good curriculum has low barriers and high ceilings. And I found there's a good batch of students coming from difficult backgrounds sometimes, or just interest. Even a small barrier is enough, and I'm out of here and they're gone. It's happened to me. I had a kid say, this sucks. This activity sucks. The class sucked. Man, you suck. The school sucks. They just walked out. And I turned to the teacher and I said, Ben, what happened? And I got the backstory. The kid was sleeping on the streets rather than a 3-hour bus ride home, living with not his parents. So I said, well, it's amazing that he's coming to school even. So an easy on-ramp is something that just has that notion, okay? It's just very inviting and fun, and it should just pull kids in, okay? And an improvement model is one way to do an easy on-ramp. It's something that is a starter activity, but an improvement model means it's got the property that it's easy to do as a baseline. Kids can share their experiences. It's not daunting for anybody. It doesn't need a lot of instruction or previous theory. But as you go through the activity, it can be improved quite a bit. And Phil Sadler at Harvard, I think we have a reference buried in here someplace for that. Send me an email if you get interested, but he's pioneered a little bit, and it works really quite well. I've got an example picture. Mini makes are exactly what that was a phrase that teachers came up with at a workshop we did this summer. By the way, this came out of a 2.5-day workshop we did last summer, which went really well. So I don't know about squeezing it into an hour here, but we'll try. Some of the tidbits anyway. The fun is actually doing the example activities. And the mini makes were just not a lot of instruction. We were playing with lenses. We're going to build our own microscope, and said, okay, you got 5 minutes. Here's some stuff, index cards, tape. Make a movie screen that just slides on your desk because you're going to focus with something with your lens onto it. So it's got to be a 3x5 inch piece of white and stand up orthogonally off the table. It's got to slide around. Go. No instructions, nothing. And it's sort of a mini make. You're not trying to put the engineering design process or plan a whole open inquiry. Kids just like to do that, and it sort of breaks up the flow. Very clear test methods. If you have complex testing, I mean, you lose kids as it is, but it also slows the process down, and it makes it a little ambiguous sometimes on how to improve. So working on, if you're doing a design project, well, what is it? Is it a quick test, and is it a simple test? I think I've got a pictorial example later also. Carrie talked about the reset, and they can take different forms. You could collect data and harvest it across one or several classes into averages, and then discuss that with the class. And now anybody who got bad data in their explore step has a good reset. It could be sharing a design, and everybody's sharing their prototypes. And now the class say, well, maybe let's see, do you want to use some other folks' design and start from there? So this way you're not leaving people who may have had difficulty with one step along the way. It's a way to catch up from here. Rapid iteration, how do you do that? Well, one of the things is do less better, have clear tests, start with this improvement model so they already have sort of an on-ramp and they're not stuck deer in the headlights. I think do less better has become my one takeaway for almost any sort of new activity development anyway. And better 100% completion of 70% of your goals than 70% completion of 100 of the things that you do. I'm getting a message. My internet is unstable. Terry, Steve, am I coming through okay?
You're okay on my
Yeah.
end.
Okay, good. I'll go ahead. Let me know. Steve, just pipe in if somehow audio or video get bad. So start from where they are, and there's 3 or 4 slides on this. And I think, like I said, if there's one takeaway, starting from where they are and leading to the first step being a purposeful play, both are equally important. And so we have a big movement of starting science with phenomena. But another way to think about it is start with where kids are in systems in their daily lives. Sneakers and water filters and flashlights and phones and skateboards and pizza and making cookies. There's chemistry and physics and geology and earth science. Everything is in there. And a system, it could be a natural system, could be a technological system. They'll probably have both science and engineering already in there, and the math and the T and all that follows. So think about whatever you're doing, motivated with something from their daily life, something interesting. A skateboard is a lot more interesting. Well, I was going to say than a toilet bowl, but maybe not. There's probably a fraction of kids that will think that's pretty cool. We did an LED invention, an LED gadget activity, and one of the kits was a toilet bowl seat with LEDs on it, so it would be lighted up at night for a night visit. And then relevant and purposeful, it's not hard. Almost everything in the daily life is sort of relevant and purposeful. And you have to pick the things that are interesting. And starting from where they are, I mean, start from where you are. What is it you're interested in? Your passion? Are you a woodworker? Are you an outdoor person? I think part of having agency as a teacher is to build on the knowledge and resources you have to adapt things like EASEL models or curriculum activities or a whole curriculum your district may have bought into. You're not locked. You know what the experiences that Carrie and I've had, I think one of the most common messages from the teachers is it was really fun to take an activity and improve and put my own sort of voice into it. That's an energizing thing. Okay. There's a bunch of examples, but think about real versus realistic. We're all going to go to the aquarium and visit, and there's a big thing, and it's of this size, and can we calculate the weight of the water and everything? Well, many of these kids don't go to aquariums. Okay, it's realistic, not real. You know, so you can read this a little bit on your own, but this was really brought home to me about the difference between that. Or you're going to say, okay, we're going to build a strength of materials. We're going to build a backyard deck and this. And well, these kids are living in apartments. They don't have backyards. They don't have tools. They don't have parents that are going to go do construction projects. So that was a realistic, but maybe not a real. Was there something that is really real, but still has materials and construction, but would fit in an apartment, right? Or a house or whatever. And not to mention what some fraction of the kids, I mean, they're living on streets. Inclusivity, and I put this slide in, so Christine Cunningham's paper on the bottom is an excellent resource. Go have a look at it. Just developing narratives and context. And again, it's starting from where they are, and this is where the purposeful part is. Bring in things of, what is the impact of science and engineering, again, on their daily lives. Same with culture. Often you can draw from cultural backgrounds of kids to map what the project is. Instead of the standard bridge, can it be some other structure that has strength? Okay. There's a fun intro to engineering class that Oregon Tech teaches down in Klamath Falls, and their intro to engineering class, they all designed a chicken coop as their first starter project. And it's got structures and it's got strength and they've got some heating and lighting and everything, but it's super relevant. You can imagine, the kids down in Klamath Falls in that region going to that particular campus of Oregon Tech. Maybe that's, I suppose that's relevant maybe in some good parts of Portland anyway out there. And then I won't dwell on this, but one of the things about, this inclusivity and equity is being resourceful. So, it's a great activity is the egg drop. But to some kids, that's their breakfast. I've had kids say this, oh man, I could have eaten those. Spaghetti bridges are fun, but that's dinner for some kids in your class. So think in this issue of around, daily life and relevance. What is the daily life of those kids? And are we doing some things that really don't map well? They see something different from just this fun activity. They see dinner wasted or breakfast. And then we want to mention this thing about conceptions. There's a lot of research work that's been done around there. And Carrie and I worked with Paige Keeley recently and had a lot of fun developing the first book talked about formative assessment around engineering and technology, but it's quite appropriate to this integrating engineering into science. Paige is fabulous. A number of you probably have seen some of her formative assessment probes for science areas. And this book came out, a couple of years ago during COVID, and it was a fun exercise. Something good came from being holed up during COVID. And really, the examples we give in there in the probes are, again, all daily lives. They're bicycles and birdhouses and backpacks and phones and pizzas. And if you're interested, at the end resource page, there's a link to a free sampler, which has a chapter from the book in there. But it's, again, ask the kids. So we did a wild, an activity with clean water. And I started with who's been out camping or other places and had to drink from the wilds. And more than half the kids raised their hand, and then we started from there. Okay, I talked about the easy on-ramps. There's some examples here. And one on-ramp is just your warm-up. Okay, it's a great activity. I'll show you one in a sec. For the life straw, where the inventor of the life straw shows how he came up with it. It was an on-ramp. They got to see concepts. They got to see the notion of dirty water, cleaning water. And another thing is an improvable model. And let's talk about that. Here's a very visual example. This was an air rocket activity. We were doing something and we were giving a workshop for the state. I think Carrie and I, we worked on this as our first project together. A bottle of water rockets are fun, but they're a little messy. It's hard to test in a classroom. They're not very repeatable. So we did one where we converted to a pneumatic pressure, a little bicycle pump, and then a little valve, and it launches this air rocket. But everybody got some simple instructions with 3 index cards to build this model on the upper left. It's a tube. You roll up the tube, tape it, roll up an index card into a cone, stick it on, take the 3rd index card, cut some fins. It's an improvable model. Everyone builds the same thing. It's quick, it's fun. Go launch it, get some data on it. And then they moved into their own phase of exploring. So is it better with long or short tubes? Is it better with 1 fin, 2, 3, or 4, or 5? Straight fins or curved fins? Pointy nose cones or flat? Break up into teams. Each team is going to take a set of 1 variable and then explore. So that was the science. And then they went into the design. And you notice the improvable model, some of the kids' designs, this curvy fin one in the middle, the multi-stage one on the right. It's actually not multiple stages, but multiple sets of fins. An improvable model has this property that everyone starts with something simple. It could be your little 4-wheel car, and that's it. But then you can go on to a better vehicle. Or I'll show you an example with the life straw. Okay, and this is a very powerful approach, and it doesn't dumb it down. It's not giving it away. It's not that, kids are just very happy to be given stuff, loose set of instructions, or just guidance and say, here's your goal, go. But it leads to then the explore step. I've got some more on tactics here on testing and iterations, and please have a look at the handout. So we want to show you 2 examples. One that was a mapping kind of using this EASEL model of a very popular activity, the clean water filter. There's hundreds of versions of that you can find out there. And then another one on hydroponics and farming, which is an existing activity, but it gives some food for thought on what it might be to be able to make an improvement on that. So let's see, we're at 5:12. Carrie, I think maybe I'll skip the video on the clean water because the slides are pretty explanatory. Maybe we'll play that video for the intro to the hydroponics.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So let's take this example we've done it from, sixth grade, fifth grade actually, to advanced third year environmental AP science. And you can scale things up and down. So here's an example of an easy on-ramp. This is the inventor in the upper left of the life straw. And for those of you who haven't seen it, it's a life straw. He's showing the predecessor, which was for the life bottle. But it's a straw, a thick one, and you stick it in the water and you suck through it, and water comes out absolutely clear down to the level of removing viruses. So we play a fun video, and it shows his story, and he got motivated by Katrina and the aftermath. And then he has a huge tank, and he dumps in seaweed and mud, and then he says, here's some rabbit poop from my neighbor, and dumps that in and shakes it up, and the kids are getting grossed out. And then he takes some sample of the water and passes it through the life bottle and proceeds to drink from it, and it's just fun, 5-6 minutes. It shows the purpose. It's playful. It's a video that can be an easy on-ramp. And the kids moved to an improvable model, but again, we didn't explain contaminants and materials and all these sorts of things. Said, look, here's 4 things: nylon hose, sand, gravel, coffee filter, and just make your own life straw using bubble tea straws. So we gave them bubble tea straws and go, and they could make it anyway, but they had to work within those 4 materials, and they had to sketch a little design. You can see an example on the right, and what order of materials, and explain why. We didn't give a lot of theory or just go. And the class was just building a whole bunch of filters, and they worked, they didn't work. Kids would look at each other's. That's an example of purposeful play, but it's doing an improvable model, because then that first quick and dirty, or maybe it was a quick and pretty clean, one motivates doing an explore step. The explore step was then break into teams. We didn't say science, and you can certainly say science. We're going to explore the scientific properties of materials for filtering water. And if it's an advanced class, you can look at filtering chemical contaminants, biological contaminants, physical contaminants. It's a 6th, 7th, 8th grade class, and time is tight. Physical contaminants are simpler and easier. Break into teams. You guys have 2 teams might take sand, 2 teams might take gravel, 2 teams might take coffee filter, 2 teams paper towels. Some kids want to bring stuff in from home, sure. But then sort of test scientifically. And it's a very quick test where we basically had samples of turbidity from 10 to 250 that they could just do a quick comparison, walk up to the front of the class and compare. And if you don't want to make samples, you can sort of project a picture, and kids could quickly find out with their designs where they were. And then we actually had a turbidity meter, and they measured quantitatively, and you can see an example of a reset. The graph is a combination of the filtering properties, meaning the lower is better. The lower than the bar, it means the more the material cleaned out the contamination. And we had a secret rabbit poop mix, which was just Hershey's cocoa powder, but it was enough to cause some excitement. So kids were trying to guess what was in there. And kids to bring in rabbit from their home, their experiments sort of working well to more quantitative. Okay, and that then motivated the design phase. You can see some of the actual designs on the left. It was a classic challenge. It had constraints, it had goals, it had a budget. They could use additional materials. We gave them more materials. We gave them around 7 or 8 instead of the first 3 or 4 for the first improvable model. And they had to then really design it scientifically. They had to have their design on the right, the quantity, the order, use a CER kind of approach of I'm claiming that this design works based on this set of evidence from the experiments we had done before, explain their reasoning. And that middle picture is pretty amazing. Most kids can get to the point that then, step by step, and this is sort of over a week, you can take longer. It's 3 days is probably the minimum on there. But, they were taking this cocoa powder, chocolate. Basically, I could take chocolate milk and it would come out crystal clear and almost no chocolate flavor. So with that, we want to talk about another example, which is around vertical farming. And then, Carrie, we have the slides here. We're at 5:17, I think. So the video is about 4 minutes. Would you like to play that and then just we'll walk through the
Well,
slides?
let me put into context, say something about it, and then let's play the video and then have questions.
Sure.
So one of the projects that I've worked on over the years with a group from Hofstra University is the idea of vertical farming. As the amount of arable land on the world is being used up, the population is increasing. What are we going to do? In particular, people who living in cities are importing food from the countryside, and it's costly and it causes pollution and so forth. So the idea of vertical farming is that we start farming in cities on the sides of buildings. And so we had an NSF grant to develop a series of activities in which kids actually do some hydroponics and design a vertical farm. So with that as context, go ahead with the 4-minute video.
Okay, we'll show you kids doing it because I think it talks about the purposeful part. And let's see.
All right.
I may have to see new share. Let's see if we can get the video up. Everybody seeing a video?
Not yet. There we
Not
go.
yet.
Now, here we go.
Okay. Yeah, let me find roughly where that section is up there.
For growing food keeps
Okay, there we go. We're pretty close here.
as the world's population rises, do not have the food they need to. On a second critical issue, food scarcity. Today, 1 in 8 people do not have the food they need to thrive. As the world's population rises, the problem is only getting worse. Meanwhile, the amount of land that's suitable for growing food keeps getting smaller. Cutting forests to make room for more farms could devastate rare natural habitats and make global warming worse. One solution: vertical farming using hydroponics, growing crops in water without soil.
The water comes from this tank, which if you open up, there's just a whole bunch of water.
Hydroponic beds can be built vertically onto the sides of tall buildings, so there's no need for farmland. And food can be grown right where it's needed.
How to get the water in and out so the plants can have water.
In Stephen Hayner's class at Claggett Creek Middle School in Oregon, students participating in Engineering for All are discovering how vertical farming can help feed the world.
This one actually brought a real-world problem and gave the kids an opportunity to try to solve a real-world problem. And I thought that was really interesting for them to move into. When it comes to urban farming, most of the kids learn that there's just not much space available in big cities. And so in order to have farm and grow plants in there, you got to think about new methods of growing.
They'll have like a drain or something.
I think it's definitely getting a lot harder to feed the more people on the planet because the population is definitely growing and it's just going to continue to grow. And with the hydroponic systems, I feel like you'd have a wider variety of food that you can plant yourself at home. So you will just have like a better like eating supplies. Plus it's more food and it's like faster and more efficient.
And what is the size of the cups? 2 inches.
To learn how hydroponics works, students are building their own hydroponic systems. Teams start by drilling holes for the cups that will hold their crops.
Check the measurements, 29.
They prep the tubing that will keep the plants watered. Another team is building the structure that will hold the finished growing tray.
1, 2, 3. Sorry, you put that on and I'll put the
They
lid
put
on.
it all together, and then they are ready for the grand challenge: designing a vertical farming solution from scratch, using an informed design process to apply math and science to the technical and engineering problem at hand.
All the water just kind of goes all the way through the piping.
They were given some type of question that they had to solve. They'd come up with ideas and design prototypes. After they designed a prototype, then they would go ahead and analyze their prototype and look at some data, changes their prototype, and in the end, see if it actually worked.
Our design, it rotates like a Ferris wheel right here. And then it holds removable plant boxes. It dips into the water. It's on the north side for the maximum sunlight, and it's an ebb flow system.
This is the greenhouse, so after that's where we do our harvesting. And this is what we use to take the plants on and off the side of the building so we can plant and harvest them and re-put new plants on.
The food is sold to the residents at this fruit stand, and residents now have access to fresh local fruits and vegetables.
This really opened up their eyes just to the idea that there's more opportunities in engineering. I always tell them that if they find something they like, there's an engineering career for it. And so they learned about agricultural engineers, which is something completely new to them. They didn't know that there was a field out there like that.
Engineering is problem, not kind of core research, like what's some of the physics, like how's the universe built or all of that. But it's more about we need something and we'd like to get there, so how do we do that? And I think it's really nice with engineering when you see the tangible results.
Once the plants started to grow, we didn't want the light to burn them. So we have this nail up here on a rope. So what we do is we can lift it and we can tie it back on.
I think maybe Mahir, we lost Mahir.
Well, I can fill in till he comes back.
Oh, great. All right.
Okay. So unfortunately, you didn't see the last part of this video. You could hear the kids talking about it. The very complex farming system that you saw a picture of, the kids created that with a CAD system that they learned how to use CAD. I think it was SketchUp that they were using in that case. And they designed this amazing system where this huge carousel on the side of an apartment building allowed them to replace the plants and harvest and so on and so forth. And within the classroom, when kids were doing some experiments with hydroponics, they had to invent a system where the growing lights could be raised as the plants grew. And so one of the eighth graders was explaining how she just had a nail at the top and wound the string around to shorten the holder for the lights as the plants grew. So one of the things that we wanted to open up discussion about to see if anyone had some ideas to suggest in our last 5 minutes, if there was, it's a rather complex activity. Takes quite a bit of time to present, involves having kids learn CAD and so forth. And it's somewhat expensive for the equipment to do hydroponics. But we were thinking it might be worth brainstorming about how this could be simplified. You don't have to have hydroponics to do vertical farming. We're down to 5 minutes, so I think maybe the best thing to do would be to open up to any thoughts about either simplification or any questions about anything we've been talking about. So, Steve, how do you want to? Can we do hand raising for anyone?
Yeah,
who would like
you can
to?
do a hand raise, or you
Yeah.
can type something in the chat if you'd like, or click on the hand raise. And Carrie, I'll let you call on people as they.
All right, I think I can see everybody here. I'm scanning for hand raising. Steve, you watch the chat, okay?
Okay.
Carrie, do you want me to put those slides up? I was dropped and I'm back in.
Sure. We're saving the last 5 minutes for questions or
Sure.
thoughts.
So let me go to that one slide with the 3 phases, so as context for you.
All right. Although if we do that, Mahir, we can't see hand raises.
Is that right? Is there not a way, Steve, to just have the screen be part of the thing along with the hand raiser chat?
I think you can share your screen.
Yeah, I think there's a way to do that.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm just going to show the slide. Maybe I won't maximize it. And how does that look? Can folks see the slide?
Yep.
Yeah, you might as well do the slideshow click because we're looking
Okay.
at the plan.
There we
Okay, so so one of the things that we were concerned about with this particular set of activities, purposeful play is usually the way we like to start a simple model to get the kids engaged. And it's like a make activity. And this seemed to be missing from this activity. We started with videos and so forth about the problem to solve, to get them motivated, but not a particular activity. Were there any ideas that out there that anybody might have to suggest something we may start with? Some of you who in particular do activities with plants.
You
I'm
can also
watching
type
for
it
you.
in the chat as well. Anybody?
Lucia?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I know that many times just having a plant grow in water is mind-boggling to the kids. And
Yes.
I've done that in a variety of different ways, but just starting with something simple like that, like having a plant and, you know, a cup of water on the classroom windowsill and watching the roots develop in the water. And that's pretty easy to set up, especially if you have a bunch of spider plants around or other plants that root easily, sweet potato vines, etc.
And building on that idea, there could be a bunch of different seeds, have different kids with different ones, have them choose what seeds they want to start with, and see how they develop. And of
So,
course,
so it's a great suggestion because it's a super common activity. My wife's a Montessori teacher, and she does that with her 3 to 6-year-old kids and just a paper towel. So think about that. It's certainly an improvable model because a seed and water is the absolute, you know, minimum for hydroponics. Certainly it can improve. And if I were to think about a purposeful play activity, Gary suggested, remember we talked about choice as one of the key motivators. So multiple seeds, let kids pick that. I've done indoor greenhouse, designing an LED greenhouse activity, and kids get to pick their plant. And tomatoes are big, but actually this was a large Hispanic group of students, and so jalapenos were quite popular amongst some selection. So what I might add is maybe just have some things there of salt and sugar, and I don't know, chocolate powder, cocoa, and say, heck, which, you know, you can also put these in your water and see which might make the plant grow better. I mean, why not? Maybe some sugar, maybe some salt, maybe nothing. That brings it purposeful play. And within 2 or 3 days of germinating and sprouting, you'll kind of know what's happening, right? And so,
well, hold on here. I want to, we just came up at 5:30. I want to be respectful of people's time, and you can stay on for questions. Is that correct?
yeah, we can stay. And
awesome. So let me do a couple of quick announcements. Then we'll do a round of applause for Carrie and Mahir, and then we'll have time for questions. So first off, if you are somebody who needs a certificate for attending, I put a link in the chat. You can click on that, and that you give us some information, and we will send you a certificate. And if you don't need a certificate, but we would love to have your input about the webinar today, so you can click on that and provide that information. So we would appreciate that. Also, the fall OSTA conference now is scheduled for November 2nd. It's going to be at Roosevelt Middle School in Eugene. And we are accepting proposals. So those of you who want to use EASEL between now and the end of the school year and have a project that you would like to share with the larger Oregon community and Washington, you can present a session at OSTA, and there's links on the website for that. Also, we're looking for nominations for excellent science teachers. So people in your building, people you connect with, even yourself, if you're doing some amazing things, there's a nomination form for awards. And then again, if you're interested on expanding your impact on science education or STEM education in Oregon, we are always looking for people to volunteer on the OSTA board or with our events and pieces. So those are my announcements, and I would like to give a
So
big
Steve, before applause, I want to offer a carrot for your fall conference. If this was interesting to folks and you think you've got an activity that you already do that you'd want to map using this EASEL model, or something you'd always want to do, but this is sort of I can offer a carrot. Hopefully it's not a stick, but reach out to me, and depending on your project and our competence, we'd probably be happy to help you try to figure out how to do that mapping and get you on your way to submitting a nice talk or so. So that's always fun collaborating with teachers on sort of improving activity that they're excited about. All right, Steve, go for it.
All right. So if you would please go ahead and, if it's appropriate, undo your video and mute. If otherwise, you can type the comments in the chat. We'll do a 3, 2, 1, and then we'll do applause. So 3, 2, 1. And thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, so we'll open it up to questions. So you can either type something in the chat or feel free to just unmute, and we'll make this work.
Whoever is left, by the way, this is the resource slide, so you see some of the things. And a number of these papers are free access. You can just click and get a free download, and the other ones are pretty available. And we ended on this slide to show you an example of an activity that's pretty good, but how would you map it onto EASEL? And so the biggest one is this improvable model. It's actually got good design. It's got good science in there. The kids do test different nutrients and things as part of this activity. But we've put some questions on how one could make it more inclusive, more affordable.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, folks, for putting comments in the chat there. And I'm going to turn off the recording.
All right.